And thanks for staying with us on this Wednesday edition of Newsmax Now.
And we continue now with our special coverage of this train crash in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Officials now telling us that there are 7 people confirmed dead. More than 200 have been injured. There is still one passenger at least who is unaccounted for at this time. Here's the latest from investigators on the scene.
It's a devastating scene. There are many first responders out there that are working. They are carefully examining the equipment to see if there are is there anyone else in the rail cars.
Well, NTSB officials say the search and recovery effort will take precedence over the investigation into the crash. At this point, rescue workers there are combing through debris from the accident. As we mentioned, the NTSB is investigating the cause of the crash. They say they're still not exactly sure, but they do have the train's black box. It is in Delaware now and is being analyzed. The Wall Street Journal is reporting that the train was going twice as fast as it was supposed to when it crashed. Amtrak also says the train was carrying a total of 243 passengers and crew members. It was on its way from Washington, D.C. to New York when 7 cars, including the engine, jumped the tracks. Former Pennsylvania Congressman Patrick Murphy was on that train when it crashed. He took these pictures from inside the train. Here you go. Murphy estimates the train was traveling about 60 or 70 miles per hour when the cabin went dark. He says he was in the cafe car when it flipped over, but he only had a few bumps and bruises. On Capitol Hill, lawmakers are already playing the blame game over the Amtrak crash, and they say which is funded by the government.
I've heard some politicians already come out and say if we would have spent more money, maybe that's the case, but it's something I think we really need to take a serious look at that and first of all figure out what happened up there.
That is Congressman Bill Schuster. He says the upper chamber, or Senator Bill Schuster I should say, says the upper chamber needs to take a look at rail reform bills to make sure America's railways are safe.
And safety is her job. Deborah A.P. Hersman, is a former board member of the U.S. National Transportation Safety Board. She's also the president and CEO of the National Safety Council. We spoke with her a little earlier. Listen to what she had to say.
So generally what you see is there are going to be speed restrictions. Track is going to be rated to a certain speed. On the Northeast Corridor, this is actually a high-speed corridor, but there will be sections where there will be lower speeds. Curves are one area where there might be a lower speed. And so when they're looking at speed as a factor, they will be looking at what's the optimal speed or what's the speed limit and how is the train operating. They typically have a number of groups of specialists, and so you've got specialists who are railroad engineers. They've got experience operating trains. They're going to be doing things like gathering up the records, the training records, conducting interviews with the crew. You've got track specialists. They know exactly what the track should look like, and they're trying to identify the point of derailment where that train left the tracks, and so what might have precipitated that. They're going to be looking at the condition of the rail bed, the tracks themselves to see if the rail might have been worn out or if there was anything going on there. And then you've got mechanical teams who are going to look at the cars, they're going to look at the wheel sets, they're going to look at bluing of the brake shoes. There's all sorts of forensic work that's going to go on really in these first 48 hours of the investigation. So certainly they'll be looking at the signals. They can test those signals. There's memory that allows them to take a look at what the signal positions were, what the lights were displaying. You've got dispatchers that are in a centralized location. They're not going to be right there by the tracks. They're going to be in a secure location where they're lining all of the switches and setting the tracks for which trains are going to be operating in which directions, where they're going to meet and pass. All of these things will be looked at. They're going to be interviewing an awful lot of people and collecting records in the very early hours.
Well, one of the people they're not interviewing right now, Miranda, according to the Associated Press, the engineer of that train has refused to give a statement, refused to cooperate at this point.
And it's still unclear if they've been able to recover everybody from that train derailment. Again, we're getting new information about how fast it was going. Some reports suggesting that the train was going too fast. We don't know that for sure. We're going to wait to confirm that, and of course we'll bring you the very latest on that information on this developing story. Turning now to some of the other stories topping our news today. New York City police shot a hammer-wielding man He is now in critical condition. Police say the man was a suspect in 3 separate attacks where people were hit over the head with a hammer. Local media reports police approached that suspect, and that was when he pulled out a hammer and chased one of the officers, hitting him multiple times. The other officer shot him. A top ISIS leader is now dead after an airstrike. That's according to Iraqi officials who say this video that you're seeing, or will be seeing, is from the strike that killed the second in command. U.S. officials say the coalition carried out a drone strike in Iraq in the last 24 hours, but they're not confirming whether or not that's the death of the ISIS leader. The Vatican officially recognizes Palestine as a state in a new treaty. The agreement is the first legal document between the Vatican and the Palestinian state. It sparked some grumbling, as you might expect, from the Israeli government, which calls the move, quote, disappointing. The treaty was finalized just days before the Palestinian president visits the Pope. After a day of searching, officials say there's still no sign of that U.S. helicopter that disappeared in Nepal. One senior official says the chopper may have gone down in a river. 400 Nepali soldiers and 6 helicopters were involved in the manhunt today for that missing American chopper. 8 people were on board, including 6 U.S. Marines. They were in the country there to help with disaster relief after a second earthquake hit Nepal in, just a little over 2 weeks.
Follow up to that story we brought you yesterday about a Wisconsin police officer not facing charges for shooting and killing an unarmed suspect back in March. Newly released dash cam video shows Officer Matt Kenny entering the house that belonged to the suspect, Tony Robinson Jr. Officer Kenny was responding to calls that someone was attacking people and jumping in and out of traffic. Police say the officer shot and killed Robinson after the 19-year-old attacked him. Yesterday, a Wisconsin prosecutor ruled that Kenny used lawful deadly force. Again, he will not face charges in this shooting. Turning to political news now, top Democrats may be trying to revive that fast-track bill on trade that died in the Senate yesterday. Politico reporting that Senator Harry Reid is offering to drop anti-currency manipulation language in a customs bill in his party's list of demands. This after Democrats blocked one of the most important pieces of the president's agenda, that being the fast-track provision. And even though they are supporting the package for different reasons, Republican leaders in the Senate are also backing the president here.
Hopefully at some point they'll come to their senses and realize that those who say they're on the same side as the president will actually demonstrate it by giving us an opportunity to get on the bill for an open amendment process.
The deal doesn't have to be a fight. There's a simple path forward. Just put all 4 bills together, bring them to the floor. It doesn't have, this whole deal doesn't have to be very hard.
Reid previously had called the bill bad, but senators from both sides of the aisle are working with the White House to get the bill back up and running. Democrats killed debate on it yesterday.
Chicago's credit rating just took a big dip. Moody's Investor Service downgraded the city's score by 2 levels, which could make it very difficult for Chicago to then borrow money. Mayor Rahm Emanuel is calling the move, quote, premature and irresponsible. Chicago is the only city now to be bumped to a junk bond rating by Moody's, according to a report. New Jersey governor and potential presidential candidate Chris Christie says he wouldn't have gone to war in Iraq.
I think President Bush made the best decision he could at the time, given that his intelligence community was telling him that there was WMD and there were other threats right there in Iraq.
And when he was asked, Ted Cruz told The Hill, quote, knowing what we know now, of course we wouldn't have gone into Iraq. The comments are distinctly different from Jeb Bush's remarks. He says he would have gone to war based off of information from the intelligence community, but a spokeswoman says Bush misheard the question. Of course, that question was coming from Megyn Kelly during a Fox interview. They both used different tenses. I'm going to defend Bush on this. I think he was talking about the past because he was referring to Clinton.
I think whether he was talking about the past or whether you can't say you misheard that question. He obviously,
but
as
you
you mentioned,
hear the
he went
interview.
into autopilot mode to answer that question, and you cannot do that, especially given the history of his brother with Iraq. And as you heard, very deftly done by Chris Christie and Ted Cruz there to jump on and get on. This is something that's going to continue to haunt Bush.
But you heard the way he said it, though.
I
he
absolutely
said Clinton would have done the same thing.
Well, actually, Hillary Clinton voted to go to war with Iraq, and
right.
We don't know what she would say about the situation because she hasn't answered any questions in some 20 days.
But he's keeping track.
Are you out there, Hillary? More to come here. We're going to keep our eye on the situation with the train. Much more to come here. We're going to have our second part with our interview with Dick Morris, talking about the dysfunction of Democrats with the White House, what's going on in the Senate. Stick with us. More to come here on Newsmax Now.